We want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us. A competitive spirit is something that I and others joining me today definitely possess, as they are waving at the camera. Just in case you hear some giggling in the mics as I start talking, if you are just listening to the audio.
You got to make it worth watching.
Absolutely. I was going to say, and like, there's also an encouragement of those that aren't, that are just listening, to maybe check out the video.
Yeah, we need to get our YouTube subscribers up.
Yes.
Because if we get, 100 subscribers, Matt will shave his head into a mohawk.
Oh,
that seems reasonable.
Nice.
Yeah.
I would shave my head into a mohawk for something reasonable,
Yes.
not
That is
that.
incentive. What?
Yes.
What do you mean? 100 subscribers.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah.
It ain't easy to get 100 subs, man. People don't like to click that subscription. We gotta really work at this.
But right now we're not. All we're doing is putting it on our Fed Church page, which has well over 100 subscribers already. So that's what I'm saying.
Gotta do something
1,000.
better than that then.
Yeah. Well,
1,000 subscribers.
Heather Fales with the idea last year. I think you were made aware of this. A fundraising idea for the Dominican trip to shave every pastor
Yeah.
here. So
that- Oh, yeah, I
No,
remember
please
that.
don't.
Like a
Yeah,
good
whatever.
idea.
Angie's never seen me without a goatee.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's been
long time.
Like high school, freshman year of college,
that
that I've not shaved.
Oh, okay.
Like
It's probably
I
been 2
obviously,
years for me, maybe. 2
yeah.
years.
And then Pastor Ed, I don't think he could exist as a human without his mustache. When that idea was brought to him, he very much no.
Yeah.
Like,
what is
no
going on under
willingness.
that nose? That's what I want to know.
I don't know.
Like, we just have never seen it.
Katie's
We
cover
have-
your
so we
eyes.
want
We
to
haven't.
know.
I mean, he's what, 75? And
Sure.
so I think
Something
he's
like
had the
that.
mustache for 50 plus years for sure.
Yes.
And so I do think there would be a lot of money raised.
Probably
And maybe-
longer than Burt Reynolds had his. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
quite possible.
Absolutely.
There could be a record here.
Not Bert.
And people, you don't know who that man is. That's showing you how young you are.
Yeah, it's for our,
man.
our younger.
Yeah, we're
our
old.
older. I mean, our older
Yeah.
subscribers.
But it's, I think, and the funny thing is Pastor Ed does have a competitive spirit. And so I wonder if enough money was raised for both missions trips that are coming up.
Yes.
We could do a joint venture, since you're leading one to Honduras.
Correct.
I'm leading one to the Dominican.
Yes.
And if Pastor Ed gets on board, I think it would have to be like the three of us would shave and Rick would grow a beard.
Yes.
So it would be the
Perfect.
opposite.
Yeah.
That is perfect.
What's the number though? 10,000?
I don't know. Wait, people subscribe to what from us?
No, I'm saying if
For the fundraiser.
for a
How
fundraiser,
much money do we need to raise?
just strictly a fundraiser for the missions trips.
Yeah, I feel like 10,000 is
For
out
each
there.
trip? For
Well,
both or 10,000
No, I
together?
think
So the
five,
hard
five
thing is
apiece is
like-
fair.
But it would have to be like above and beyond what people are already going to.
Give.
What if we make Rick dye his hair blonde again, and then we'd have an Eminem pastor again?
In Eminem Pastor. Okay.
Yes.
We could do that.
Yeah.
We could. Katie
Oh
is
man,
struggling.
we are.
Yeah.
We should probably start again.
Yeah,
I don't know.
No, I like this.
These are-
Yeah. We're just going to keep going instead of starting over
also
and
dye
edit this
Katie's
out.
hair
Yes.
Dye it what?
purple,
Purple.
Oh.
Okay.
maybe hot pink.
Hot
That one's
pink.
better.
Hot pink.
Hot
Well,
pink.
Steve,
Yeah.
if you had enough hair to still be dyed,
That's
But
what I'm
then
saying. When they
we-
say shave, it's like, yeah, whatever. The Lord hath cast me. My hair, my scalp has no competitive spirit anymore.
Your
It gave
scalp's
up.
given up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. I would say for sure.
Yep.
But as we talk about
That was a
competitive
transition.
spirit, it was. And that was a really good attempt of getting back on track.
Thank you. Thank you.
So today, as today is a standalone podcast that some maybe have tuned out already.
Yep, they're gone.
Pastor Rick might have shut it off by now.
Yes.
But no, a competitive spirit is something that plays a role in a lot of our lives. And one of the ways it starts, at least in this culture, is sports. And in many cultures, athletics is huge. Maybe different sports, but it's something that can increase a competitive spirit. But the vast, vast, vast majority of us realize at the age of 18 or 22 that we are no longer playing competitive sports. And sorry, adult intramural leagues is not like
Church league softball fist fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a thing.
It's that's why I don't play church league softball.
Yeah, it's
because it's a
intense.
bunch of people that profess Christianity and act like fools.
Yeah.
You know, and so
Battle Royale.
Not all the time,
Yeah,
but
no.
there's a lot of that happens, and I don't know if I could control myself. So, and I'm not a baseball player. I'm not any good. But once you start playing a game, for some, the competition just it's inevitable that the mouths start going, and then it's just then you act sinful and stupid. But there's also a lot of other ways that even those, as we were talking through stuff, one person who's not competitive at all or didn't play any sports, they were like, well, I'm just not competitive. And then another person who never played sports in their life talked about how they were competitive. And then the first person's like, oh yeah, actually now I can see I'm just not athletically competitive, and I think sports are stupid. And the first person's like, yeah, I agree. But it was a conversation that Tasha and I had with two other people, and yeah, so like even if it's not sports, there are a lot of ways that we as humans are competitive and really fall into comparison, and just comparison leads to jealousy and envy, and that obviously is not a healthy road to go down. So if you think about it, what is at the heart of competing? So when we look at competing, what's at the heart of competing, and why do we as humans love to compete or watch others compete? Is there an intrinsic drive of competition in us? Because from the beginning of time, that competition has been part of humanity. And so what do you think that is?
Well, I feel like there is actually a physiological aspect of competing. I mean, your endorphins are released. And so, yes, is the heart of competition something that you want the prize? Yeah, you do. But I'm just going to be honest. There were times I was on teams that I'm like, there's no way we're going to win. But I was still just as competitive.
Absolutely.
And so there is an aspect of your body releasing different things, which lead to the happy hormones essentially. And so that is, I think, part of the drive for competition. It doesn't always have to be sports either. It can be in other things as well, where those same things are released. And so, yes, I think there's definitely a physiological component to the drive for competition.
Oh, there's a ton of people that at a young age, it's not sports, but in the classroom, they're competitive. Or they might be gifted in theater or the arts or musically. And it's a competition of I need to be first chair if I'm going to go for the Philharmonic, or I need to be the lead role when I go for the play, or I need to, whatever it might be, that the competition can set in at a pretty early age.
I think it's just, there's a lot of different things that play into it. Because, I know for me, I lean more of, if I'm first, then I, as a person, am better than you. I just want to be good, and I want to have that, higher status. And so for me, sometimes I let my identity slip into it, too. Of,
for sure.
I am a good baseball player. I'm a good, basketball player, stuff like that. And so I feel like a lot of times we put who we are, and it has that, physical ranking of, I am good at this, instead of just having the relying on just feeling or stuff like that. And I think too, we're all designed to work and worship something. And so we all have that natural desire to want to do something good and give it up to something. And so we want to put in that work to be a good athlete, so therefore we can win. But then we bring the glory back to ourselves instead of God. And so I feel that's kind of where it comes from, of just placing our pride and our identity in something that isn't God, but then also just wanting to work for something and work hard.
Well, and we're instructed to work hard, at whatever we do, Scripture instructs us to do that. But when we're doing it to then, like you said, put your identity in that thing opposed to God and honoring God, that's where, and that's an easy way to slip up.
Just even when there's a lot of Christian outreaches or ministries, they're always hitting on this is not your identity. This is not who you are. I put my identity in Christ. That's just one of the most common sermons I hear when I go to Christian ministries. And I feel it's really easy to be I am this player instead of just being like, I am a child of God.
Yeah.
That's good.
So when obviously sports, it was something for all of us, like we talked about, and I didn't even think about this, but Steve mentioned before we hit record, I mean, to imagine that we were off track, even more so than we were after we hit record.
That was being on track.
Yeah. But just the fact that we all graduated from the same high school.
Yeah, go Tigers.
And so
99.
Yeah. That's really going to show our age.
Well,
Yeah, Tasha, what were you?
I was 97, Steve was
2016.
99. Yeah.
I was 01.
Yep. I was just say.
I was born in 98.
Yeah. She was born the year after I graduated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I graduated high school and she wasn't born yet. But
Nice.
yeah, I've gotten past that for a while because I've coached kids of people I've graduated with and stuff, and so the reality of I'm just a different age group right now is very apparent.
And Mal and Katie were my coaches at one point.
Yeah.
Both of you.
Yeah.
I was to say it was man, that even does seem like a while ago, even though it wasn't. But still,
I mean,
6
it was
years ago, 7 years
I
ago.
graduated high school. So
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It was a little bit.
almost a decade.
It was a long time ago. Well, I saw something, again, not to go down a side path too much, not that I stop it, but I saw something where, a meme that had, someone was talking about 30 years ago, and my mind went to 1972 instantly, and then I realized they were talking about 1992, and it's
Yeah.
like, and obviously this is from a year ago because it's, 2023, but it did make me laugh because when I hear a certain amount of decades ago, I still think, oh, way back, like before I was around. But 30 years ago, I was a teenager. Anyways, yeah. So, what are some other areas that you've seen competition creep into your life? And whether it is, and maybe not competition as much as just the competitive spirit, because when we get a certain way, at least I've found, as I would feed my competitive spirit in sports and athletics, that competitive spirit would not be left on the field. That competitive spirit, especially if I wasn't aware, would bleed into other areas. And so what other areas of your life have you seen this happen? And has that competitive nature ever crept into any ministries or church-related things that you've seen?
Yeah, I think being part of youth ministry for a while now, early on I was with a group of other youth pastors, and they were in a closer proximity than our church was because they were all in Mill Creek, Erie area. So there was a lot more competition as far as, how big each youth group was. And even out here, I was comparing each other to, how many students you have. But what I really liked about that group was the fact that they really worked hard to what they would say, not steal each other's, youth, and to really encourage them to stay at the church that they're at and not come to theirs after an event or something like that.
Yeah.
So I really respected that idea of, everyone respecting each other's ministries and really trying to encourage each other, as opposed to, everybody trying to make their own kingdom bigger and bigger and better than the ones around them. So that was a good example, I would say, when I got into ministry, of people that really cared about big church overall and not necessarily about the size of their youth group and growing it at the expense of others. So that was a really good example. But I have seen others where, it is a competition, getting more people there because we're doing it better. God is blessing us more. So, where that can be a really negative spirit and put a bad taste of what being followers of Christ really is all about to others, I think. So,
Absolutely. I was going to say, because it's great that group had a no stealing policy, but I think we've all possibly been part of a ministry or a church, or, thinking of it for myself. Yeah, like if someone at your church all of a sudden starts going to another church, there's this territorialism, this this possessive nature maybe that kicks in. That's just not. Yeah, I don't know. Is that all bad?
I don't think it's always bad. It depends on what situation you're in. I know.
And I'm referring to, like, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I'm referring to, like, a situation where this person's going to another Bible preaching church. So it's not like they're going to a church that's like cultish
Right.
or like
Yeah.
suspect. Obviously, then you, without a doubt, say
Yeah.
something. But
And I was thinking more of like just the competitive or the possessiveness.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't necessarily thinking of it in like the church setting, because that I think is a very fine line. Like
Yeah.
I think that is really tricky. But I know for me in my professional setting, like I'm a nurse in the emergency department, and I'm very possessive about my patients. Like, no one touches my patients unless they ask me first. And it actually is so that I can advocate for them. It's not me trying to control, but like I have to know everything that's going on with them. And
it's
so
not you trying to control it all.
in that situation, yeah. But guess what?
Yeah.
You would want me
Yes.
to be able to control everything in your.
I
So
know that.
I think there are aspects of
Yes.
this that you're like, yeah. I'm not flipping burgers somewhere. Like I have people's lives in my hands, and so like it's very important that I am possessive of them. And the people I've seen not be that way are like, you're actually not caring for your patients very well right now.
Yeah.
And so there is a level where like, yes, my competition may have started at my birth in my family, but then, spread to like been fostered, in the sports field and everything. But there is healthy competition. And even at home, we were all very much competitive with our sports. But when we would play games at home, it never got cutthroat as far like our card games or different things like that. It was always a very healthy thing where we would encourage one another.
Well, so we felt that way. But think about the others that did not grow up in a competitive home that
Well, just
got
because
like
it's loud doesn't mean
chewed
it's,
up and spit out.
just because it's loud doesn't mean that it's
yeah.
not. Because I've seen other homes that I've went into and I've been like, oh my gosh, you
Where
said that
it's-
you weren't competitive. Like,
Yeah.
I'm backing away. Like, I don't
Yeah.
want to play games with you. Like,
Yeah.
you're mean.
Yeah.
And so there is a difference. And so I think there
Very
are
much
times
so.
that like.
Yes.
Yes, we call it like competition or competitiveness, and that automatically gets a bad label on it. But I think that there are very much good labels to that. I have seen it destroy ministries, though. I have
for
seen
sure.
it very much destroy things, and so there is a balance in these. In this
So
area.
destroy in what way? Just in not specifically like I'm not saying what ministry was destroyed and give it, but
No,
like
yeah, and
like,
I'm thinking more like an example came to my mind as I was sitting here. When we were in India and we had separate teams. And so there were teams going out, and this team was seeing like physical healings in the field.
Yeah.
And my team had not seen that yet. And so then it was all like, you guys don't have faith. You don't have this. We're seeing this. You're not seeing that. And it was like, okay, I'm one of the leaders. This is my fault then. This is totally my fault that my team's not seeing this. But yeah, we weren't seeing the physical healings at the time. We were seeing salvations in droves of people like coming to Christ. And then I got to like the Holy Spirit taught me, and then I got to teach my kids like, hey, the greatest miracle is the one of salvation.
Absolutely.
And so then we understood the greatest miracle of salvation, so that guess what? Later in the trip, when we saw the blind man see and the lame man walk and the mute person, I guess it was a deaf person hearing, it wasn't mute. They didn't even care. The kids did not even care at that point. They were like, yeah, but did you see the salvations we had? And we're like, yes, but like that could have destroyed us. And it almost did destroy me as a leader, being like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing good enough as a leader. My faith isn't strong enough. And that's why my team's not seeing this. But this team is. And actually that other team, they imploded later in the trip. And so I've seen where it can be good on both things, but in ministry, there's a really fine line of where competition should be and where it shouldn't be.
Especially when it has false doctrine. that's where it leads to,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like that's where it definitely, but that usually there's an element of comparison that goes into.
And maybe it was more
with
comparison than competition.
Well, no, but still, but
But-
I think they're very similar. Where when something like that happens, then it's, I don't know, maybe not, but for me, it's like that same competitive spirit. It's this. It feels like the same spirit in me,
Right?
That's of comparison. Also, does that, in that regard.
So I feel like what matters is where the comparison is. Is it focused on other people, or is it focused on yourself? Because like I feel like if you're comparing like, oh, that team did better than that team, that's where you can have the imploding and like just like the lies come to seep in, because we're all on the same team. If we're like talking about like the big church, like we're all supposed to be pushing people closer towards Christ.
Yeah.
But the minute we go towards each other to try to check each other, that's when it gets really, really murky on like who's right and who's not, and like who has power dynamics. But if it's good to want to be better than yourself, than like.
Yeah, to be a better, like to continue down the road of sanctification. Like that's what Scripture's striving us or pushing us towards. So to, continue to be more and more like Christ is obviously our goal. And to compare against ourselves, yeah, very much so, is something that we need to continue to do. I do think, it is an interesting thing because there's also scriptural precedent that would point towards the benefit of being part of a faith community. And so, at least at some level of consistency. And so that's where it's tough. So someone that just bounces around, or it also depends on why someone is leaving one church and going to another. That's a whole different topic. But I don't know. It is weird to being in ministry to fight against that possessive mindset, and just like you said, being on the same team with the other churches and pastors in the area, and that's crucial. But so as we've talked, this can create a rich soil for growth of envy and jealousy. When we have a spirit of comparison, and when we're competing, we can get to that place of jealousy and envy because there's always going to be someone better. If we get into a comparison game, there's always going to be someone stronger, smarter, more artistic, more athletic. They're further in their walk with Christ. They're seeing better success here on earth. There's always going to be someone else further along. And so we see in James 3:14-16, it says, "But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice." Also, Proverbs 27:4 says, "Anger is cruel and fury overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy?" So knowing this, does this mean if a competitive spirit can lead to envy and jealousy, should Christians avoid competition entirely? And if not, what are practical ways to approach competition to keep the sin of it under control?
I mean, we are instructed to be in the world, but not of the world. And I think that is, that applies to this situation as well. For a Christian to say, just because I'm a follower of Christ, I can't be competitive. That's a cop-out answer, in my opinion. I mean, that's part of the discipline process. You beat your body, make it your slave to be competitive in the sport and to do, or whatever area that you're working on, to make yourself better in that. Well, it's the same in the Christian life. And so
it's discipleship 101.
Exactly. Yeah. And so in honestly, and I'm not trying to go back to but like in my competition or in my teammates were my biggest mission field. Like they were they were the ones that I invited to church with me, and I had other friends, but, and so we're called to be in that area and to look different. And so, I very much think it's important that we don't withdraw ourselves from that, but actually stay in the situation and be a light within the darkness versus just being like, no, I'm a Christian. I can't do that. It's like, well, yeah, you can.
Yeah. And so So how do we do that?
I mean, I'll answer unless anyone else wants to.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think because there seems to be like just so many levels in like the competitiveness, so it's hard for me to kind of focus on one. But I was just thinking back in college, we were a pretty toxic team. College sports, I feel like college sports, NFL, anything that like, not that I played at like a high division school, but there was always like it was cutthroat. You really were out for your own ambition because even though you were working to play on a team, you wanted to be on the team, play. You
wanted to be on the field.
Yeah, you don't want to be the bench warmer. You know, you don't want to be the practice squad. You know, being the team that the offense plays against every week. That gets old. You know, you learn more of the other team's defenses than you do of your own. You know, it's like, this is lame. You know. So you really start to really compare, and then it just becomes real cutthroat. Everybody's out for themselves, and then the goal of winning is completely lost. You know, and I think sometimes that can happen in the church setting, where it's a lot of selfish ambition. I have to say, sometimes when you go to some certain church conferences, you know, I haven't gone to a ton, but you go into the church and you just see the church and its vastness. You know, huge. It's awesome. The production that goes on, and you're like, holy cow, this is so great, you know, and there is a temptation, I think, when these churches we all get together, I think there is a temptation to feel like I will only be great if I can match this level of production, this size of building,
absolutely,
this number of people, and I believe God has called everybody to different areas. So I think it's good to be competitive in a sense that our competition isn't against other believers. It isn't even against non-believers. Our competition is against the spiritual forces of this world, the devil, Satan, unbelief. You know, I think the Lord blesses that when we have a desire to see his kingdom grow. But I think what often, unfortunately, happens, at least in the American setting, and I would, the United States, I should say, I would say this probably does happen in other countries as well, where, again, people are more churches become very more competitive about size of building, production, how great am I, you know, that there's a real temptation there that I think the competitive comes in and then taints things, and Satan uses it. Something that could be used for good is now used for evil. And I can kind of see that in the United States church, where the idea of bigger is always better. And that's just not true.
Absolutely.
But then what the big people would say was like, that's just because your church stinks, so that's why you say that. You know, you know what I'm saying?
Or you're just smaller.
Yeah,
I think the you know the word is smaller.
That connotation is that they may not say that your church is just smaller. Good for you.
You know what they mean.
The condescending is like, oh, okay, thanks, because you just can't be any better, because that's just you know what I'm saying. That's the idea, that your church can't be succeeding and reaching people, discipling people, if it's not on this, you know, United States mega level, you know. And I think that's honestly, I don't know necessarily the heart of like the mega churches that then create more churches like themselves. But in some ways, if you look outside and look at it, that is somewhat of the mentality. We do it better than you, so we're not going to plant churches. We're going to plant our church more places. And I've always kind of wondered, is that really the model we should be following? And I think that's up for them to decide. But I've wondered on the outside perspective, like, man, that seems odd to me a little bit.
Yeah, and there's a there's a difficult balance of, you know, one of the questions of, should a church that is experiencing success of people plant a site or a campus, whatever they call it, in an area where there's a number of other churches that are struggling anyways. Mm-hmm. And so
Sorry, that was a really loud drink, Katie. That was so aggressive. She's like, I'm going to compete with being the loudest drinker you've ever heard.
I ran out of water. I didn't know it was empty.
You didn't know you were empty. Yeah. Oh, man.
My bad.
Derailed.
Sorry.
No.
I felt like we need to acknowledge the loud splashing.
Yes.
Tasha wanted to say something. I could tell.
Oh man. Oh, but should they do something to help the churches that are struggling?
Sure.
And and then it's like, well, that's not our job. That's their church's. And so it goes down this whole road of a struggle, and it is difficult to know, especially when there's I mean, I don't know if we should name names, but like the one national church that it comes out that the pastor was literally doing research to get the best demographic of people that answered a question that they would leave their church and go to his, basically, if he opened a site. And just some really unscriptural stuff.
Yeah.
It was really good business. It was great capitalism.
Yes.
That's not what the church is called to do, so, and then he did it and he acted on it.
Yeah.
And like, and it's no longer there, but it just like, man. Yeah. And so I think there's a struggle to be, to not have a negative thought process about situations like that become public and general knowledge.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, great. You grew your empire.
Yeah.
But you really felt it was yours.
Yeah. And I do think, and just all that to say, I do think there's many churches that are planting what you would consider satellite churches that are doing it for good purposes to grow.
And God is calling them to.
Yeah. Grow the kingdom.
Yes.
So I'm not saying that that's, but on the outside, I think that can be a possibility within that. It's like, hey, kind of like, I think you hit the nail on the head, is it becomes like a United States capitalist business model. Yeah. And I'm just not sure that model applies really well with the church, but I know some have succeeded with thinking that way. And I've been to, one conference where it was very much intertwined with business. And I just, since I'm not business minded, maybe that's why I didn't like it as much, where I was just like, man, this ain't my jam, man.
Yeah.
It's like, I think that's great, but that's not the model that I was really into, or really that got me, charged up, excited. But I think there is a danger there. And I think the competitive spirit that's the competitive spirit that comes outside of sports, is I have more than you, the comparison, comparing yourself with the Joneses, the vehicle you drive, that's a big deal. And I think we all experience that because we are Fairview alumni, but we were all Fairview alumni that kind of lived out in the county.
We were south of the tracks.
Yes, yeah, right. So we were out in what they would call the sticks of Fairview, where everybody else would be like, oh, you lived in Fairview?
Yeah.
How many cars do you have? It's like, remember the Corsica that was sitting up there for a month frozen that wasn't working?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my car at the high school, which I did proceed to kick and dent, and my dad called it. He knew, and I lied to him, but he got me. He's like, I bet one of you guys got mad at the car and kicked it. I was like, yeah, guilty as charged. He never got mad because I think he understood why I was so ticked off, but super embarrassing, right? So none of us were like in the throes of like a lot of wealth. Yeah. But man, comparison. I remember the first day going to Fairview. Every kid, my mom said I had to dress up. So we dressed up. It was still warm out. Yeah. I still had spiked hair because at Gerard, spiked hair was still cool. As soon as I walk in, it was like, oh, I'm patting it down as best I can. Every kid's in Umbros and Sambas or whatever we call those. What are those shoes called? The soccer shoes?
Yeah.
Sambas. Yeah, everybody had to have their Sambas and Umbros. Yeah. And so as soon as I walked in, I was like, oh my gosh, lame city. Yeah. And it was like almost instant. Oh, yeah. I knew exactly where I was when I got in Fairview, like what level I was at. Like, there. That idea of that comes so early, in our lives, that it's just real sad that's where that really is ingrained in you.
Absolutely. In comparison, just it can overtake if you're not careful.
I think one of the dangers too of competition is it like pushes you to do whatever it takes to win. And so it does not matter the integrity that you have. It doesn't matter what you do, whether it's right or wrong. You just do it so that you can win. And I feel like God doesn't care so much of like what you're doing, but how you do it. And like there's one saying that's going around a lot. It's like people won't remember what you said or you did, but they'll remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, like in the name of competition, like we say things that we would never say outside of the field, or just like give that hip check that, it's probably not legal, but we're doing it anyway so that we can win. And so it's just that you're ruining your witness because you're like, it brings the worst out of people. Like if you're competitive, like it's not bringing out like your kindness or your gentleness, your patience. It's like bringing out like, I'm going to stomp on you. Like,
yeah, no, and I definitely agree with that. I do feel though there is a competitive nature again when we're competing against each other that can get very bad very quickly. But like you brought up earlier, when we're talking about, and maybe however you want to say it, maybe it's not a spirit of competition, but when we're talking about like against the spiritual realm and how we are called to put on the armor of God in battle, you can't go into that casually. Like that's where, and again, not an arrogant competitive spirit, but I feel like that's where a competitive spirit would be beneficial, in that regard. Or yeah, I don't know.
I think there's a balance to be had because I don't think it always has to bring out those bad things. I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong because it definitely can do that.
Yeah, because I would say that's the majority of the spirit that comes out of me. I will say, the competitive spirit typically goes negative.
But you know what, though? Like, that also is one of the ways that if that's recognized in you, that's an area that for growing. It's an area for, for the fruits of the spirit to then take over versus, it doesn't have to be like that.
Sure.
I mean, there are times that you still get to choose whether you're being faced with this competition or this or that. You still have a choice, even in that moment, to be like, no, I'm actually going to do the godly thing here.
Oh, sure.
And so that's part of learning to be disciplined as a person.
Yeah, I think
using competition in a way that can spur you on instead of defeat you.
Yeah, I think that's really true. What I have come to the conclusion is there are certain things I just won't participate in anymore. And I don't think that's bad. When you recognize that a lot of negative has come in competition, I think it's okay for someone to say, hey, look, I'm bowing out of that because I know what it can stir in me, and I am not willing to walk in that. Yeah. And part of that may be being honest with yourself, I'm not mature enough to walk in that. Because I think when we're thinking of competition, a lot of areas mostly are areas that you don't have to participate in. I'll just throw it out to you that way. You don't have to necessarily be in. So I've recognized that in myself, and then I try to find ways I can participate, but not necessarily in one that may cause like erupt in, super competitive. And one of the things that I think has helped me and as I've grown, is trying to, when I participate, trying to help others do well. Yeah. I try to do that with younger guys that are playing and girls that are playing Nerf or Airsoft. I'll just use that as an example. If you can direct their energy on encouraging the team to play better, to encourage them to, hey, follow me or do this to kind of build them up, that kind of redirects your competitive spirit. Mm-hmm. But I found even in those areas, these are, airsoft or paintball, where you can get really competitive, or any sort of sport that you're playing. I find if you just redirect yourself into encouraging others. But I have found even in moments where I was at, church league softball, where like you shared earlier, Mal, like softball, baseball, that wasn't my jam. I'm not good at it. Yeah. But how quickly that competitive spirit creeps in, but just taking a step back and being more encouraging, It was also humbling because, when a fly ball comes out, and I didn't spend hours catching fly balls. Yeah. So I don't even know where should I where should I go to even get this thing? You know? So I just like jump super high in the air, throw my glove up, and somehow a catch like, wow, you're really good. Like, no, that was a miraculous catch. It just happened. Like, there was no skill involved.
That was angels in the outfield.
Yeah. I ran way too far forward and had to jump super high and just pray to the Lord, please, Lord.
Yeah.
You know, so there's some humility that came with that. But when that competitive creeping came in, you know, it was really, you try to encourage others. So I think that can be good, but then you have to redirect that competitive spirit because so often it is negative.
Yeah.
In church league softball, there was a group that the youth pastor, this was not me, this is not a personal story, I'm using someone else. There was a youth pastor that started yelling at the ref. It got so wild, the ref kicked him out. And he was like, everybody, we're leaving. And the team was like, no, you are leaving. We are staying. You're out of control. He's like, oh, okay. And they laughed. And I was like, see how bad that got? I mean, that's like what Tasha's saying. Typically, that is like, it just goes to like, it's just bad. You know, so I think there's got to be, like you said, there's got to be a happy median. And I found for myself, if I go around encouraging people, that keeps me from like the competitive rage that all pedicels tend to have.
Yes. And
my dad broke a girl's collarbone at the castle. I don't know if you remember that, Katie.
I do.
Were you there?
I do, yes. But
Were
it
you
was
there
a
for
simple
that?
tackle.
It was,
you know my
was
dad.
that the,
you know my dad said she had it coming. Sorry, Michelle Miller. I feel bad for you. It's my dad.
No, they still stay in touch. It's like,
Yes.
like
It was one of those
you
funny
know,
jokes. But even to this day, my dad's still like, "Oh, you're going to play. You're going to pay." It's like, Dad, calm it down a tad.
Yeah. Oh,
But
man.
I'm just trying to give an example. That's just the spirit at which the pedicels have.
Oh no, absolutely. And the bells can get there real quick.
Yeah.
As well, and so it is something. But I think there is a happy medium. Obviously, and I've talked about this, and I'm very grateful I still have the opportunity to coach. And so there is definitely a competitive spirit in that. And I think there's a healthy way to do it. I think it's again and I have the luxury of track and field is very different. You're really competing against yourself. Like, yeah, you're competing against someone else, but I would have athletes get upset they didn't win like the 100-meter dash, and I'd look at them and be like, hey, that person is like significantly faster. There's nothing you could do short of hitting him or her with a stick, breaking their leg in order to beat them.
Nancy Kerrigan style.
Yes, I was going to say Tanya Harding. None of the kids would get it, though.
No, you guys are too young.
But literally, you just ran faster than you've ever run. So why are you upset? Like, the greatest competition is against yourself, like we talked about, and improving. And so I think there's, especially with life lessons you can learn. I know all of us learned a ton of life lessons, some good, some bad. Somewhat to do, somewhat not to do in sports.
Totally.
But yeah, I really do think that there is a redeeming element of competition. And if you realize that it's not for you because you can't handle it, there's wisdom in that as well.
Yeah, Tasha, you're a coach now too.
Yeah.
So how does the competitive spirit, come out as far as being a coach?
I think it helps to be patient and realize, like, you have to keep focused on what the things are actually important about. Because I'm working with high school girls, and it's a formative time in their life. And like, I want to do it. I want to be able to, like, the way that I act represents the gospel well.
Yeah.
And so, like, when they're doing drills, asking them how they are, and like
really
caring about who they are as the person. Because our team last year, we didn't win a game.
Just put a pause for a second? So as a coach, you actually walk around and ask them how they're doing?
Well, I'm a goalie coach, so it's not.
Did you ever have a coach that was like, hey, how you doing, buddy? Most of it was like, you stink.
Yes.
If you don't pick it up, you're going to do so many up down. Katie's just laughing, but that's awesome.
I will say this. Sorry to interrupt. We're
coming back to you, Tasha, but I just want to pause because that's shocking.
That is why, and I did have some coaches like that. Not many. That is why Dale Lewis was so influential in my life. Because he did. Okay. He was also a psychology teacher.
Yeah.
And, so like, but he actually cared about us, and he would very much hold us accountable.
Yeah.
But like, he cared about us. So how you doing? I was like, man, it was rare. But anyways, yeah. Tasha,
But just like trying to maintain the attitude of like, this could be a really good learning, like growing moment for them.
Yeah.
Because like we didn't win a game, but the girls still had to get out there and play a full like 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And so you had to keep going. We didn't have a sub most of the time. And like lacrosse is a running game.
Yeah.
And so just like, also the refs are rough. Like it's a newer sport. And so not all the refs are like really in it. And like just some of the calls are really like, it's subjective. And so there's a lot of room for argument and a lot of like, what are you doing type of thing. And so just like realizing you can't change the circumstances, but you can control how you're playing.
Yeah.
And control like the way, like I don't care if we win or lose, but we need to play in a way that was better than we were yesterday and maintain our integrity in it.
That's good.
and have a conversation with the official, but realize someone's looking at you to see how you treat another human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like at the end, like I know it's a game, but at the end of the day, there's still a person with us all.
Yeah. Like,
And so it's like there are more important things going on.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing because Katie and I's younger brother, Luke, is a principal. You know, I mean, you guys know Luke and all that stuff. He's a principal at Fairview. And it's the amount of longtime church members and believers that he has to have escorted out of games because they're acting so foolishly and screaming and yelling is sad.
Oh my gosh.
And it's, you know, like, or like to ask security to go stand by them because he's already said multiple things to them, or, you know, and it's just like, man, hey, if that's where your competitive spirit takes you, then you need to get your heart in check and do some work.
Yelling at the refs just reminded me of formative years of my life, going to Girard high school basketball games, Katie. And my parents brought this gal that was a part of Youth for Christ, and the things she would say to the ref were so epic. As a child, I knew you shouldn't say that, like even then. But I just was like, enthralled with what she would come up with and yell at the ref. It was my mom was like, just don't say anything, just be quiet. My brothers and I were just sitting there like, oh my gosh, this girl could be the coolest person we've ever met.
What comedian would talk about how one of the best things when you're a little kid in church is when you hear an old person swear? I won't say what old person I used to like sitting next to during cantata practice because he'd get upset and swear. But anyways, it helped get me through cantata practice, which was mind-numbing anyways.
As a young adult, when we would mix with the Golden Circle class, or what is the class down the basement? What's their name? It's not Golden Circle.
Oh, the Celebration class.
Celebration. And then you would hear people older guys and gals who would say things, and you're like, oh my gosh, you're as angsty as I am. Like, you guys are as ornery as we are. You're just older.
Yeah.
It was awesome. I was like, you are the coolest guy ever.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Oh, man. Okay, so I do want to...
Sorry. No, that has nothing to do with competition, but we got there somehow.
There's
Katie's looking at us like, is this what happens on this podcast?
I know.
But this is
why I wanted to say no.
We are recording later, people, and we are in VBS, so you are getting like
it is VBS week,
ridiculous.
And Katie was the one that presented, and Tasha came from camp.
Exactly.
So like, it's a different mindset
it's a
right
weird
now.
Time to be recording.
Yeah. The thing I do want to wrap up with, and this was talked about a little bit earlier when you were talking about your team in India, but just the dangers of jealousy. And Alistair Begg, in one of his sermons, when he quoted, 1 Corinthians 4:7, which says, "For who makes you different from anyone else? What do you have that you did not receive? And if you did receive it, why do you boast as though you did not?" And then Alistair Begg says, "God knows what he's doing in appropriating gifts. If you received it, why do you glory as if you did not receive it? Why do you think that you can be arrogant? How should this knowledge of an inability to assign gifts and talents affect possibly our spirit of comparison?" And I don't want to go off the rails of the gifts of healing and the gifts of the Spirit. And, was the one team experiencing physical healings because they had people gifted in that area? It does say some receive some gifts, some receive other gifts. Yeah. But how do we receive the gifts that God has sovereignly decided to give us, and then not be like, man, I really wish I would have had a different gift. You know, like I see the other gift in that person and I only got this, you know? So how do we do that? How do we walk through life and be grateful for what we've been given and not get into a mindset of comparison, especially when it comes to spiritual gifts?
Keep your mind on things above. Like, you have your gift for a reason, and that's a good thing, and we can celebrate that and be grateful and play the supportive, encouraging role of like, I really admire that gift, and so let me be around it and help them do better at it. So for the sake of the kingdom, they can prosper.
That's good.
Yeah. For sure. And remember, like, they're ones you want to be around, because if you're going to accomplish what God has in front of you, you want as many, if not all, the spiritual gifts represented. You know, like you don't want just a bunch of people like you, because then you're going to accomplish exactly what you would accomplish. You know, you want others that have the giftings and strengths that you don't possess, so that you can have that full range, you know, while doing ministry. So Steve, Katie. Well, no, I don't care who speaks to it, but like, yeah, how do you walk through that? Or have you never experienced that either in yourself or in someone else, Steve, where just the feeling of like, man, I really wish I had that spiritual gift.
Yeah.
You know, it would really, yeah. What's the question? That's okay.
Yeah,
Just say that.
I thought what Tasha said was really wise.
Yeah.
And I think too, it is like you said, Mal. It's important to have people that are using all manners of gifts.
Yeah.
And see how they're beneficial. So I would agree with both of you on that. I think sometimes and I think Paul was dealing with it, that a lot of people that had, different gifts that were, I don't know, quote unquote, more miraculous, I think there was a lot of boasting, but I also think the Lord who gives gifts is also the Lord that can take those gifts away.
Yeah.
Or put a pause on them for a period of time. And I think God does do that. When God gives us a gift to be used for his glory and we're not using it correctly, I do believe God will take that from us, whether entirely or for a season.
And I would, I would say, would you think one of the ways to use it incorrectly is, oh man, this isn't really that great of a gift?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Having an attitude that God somehow, messed up when he was giving out the gifts. Because there's a lot of people that have the people who are prayer warriors and the people who are gifted with the gifts of faith. That's one I don't think people think a lot about, is the gift of faith, and their ability to believe, almost like a childlike faith that Jesus said we need to have. When you see those people, they are such a huge encouragement. And often they're not touted, because maybe they don't have some other gift that's a little bit more out in front. But the gift of faith that comes with faith and encouragement, man, those are huge gifts that keep a church going. I know they've kept me going in times where you just want to be done, and someone comes up with a word of faith and an encouragement that is something that you need. And when those times happen for you, then you realize just how sacred and important people with other gifts are. So I always appreciate when God brings us to those points, and he does.
For sure.
Well, he will reveal that to us, how important everybody is with the different gifts.
And I think just like comparing and going down a bad path, when we start comparing, part of the reason that is because another thing that for whatever reason is ingrained in us as sinful humans, we think we should put a ranking on everything.
Yeah, that's true.
Here are the spiritual gifts. Here are the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Oh, they must be, these are the ones that are most important. These are the ones that matter the most. Oh, I didn't get the ones that matter the most. I got this, secondary one, or I got this lesser than.
Yeah. And
I think we as leaders really need to speak into people's lives and encourage them of that's not how it is. You might not be up front, like you said, but it's not about what is greater than the other. and God has gifted you.
Yeah, one last thing I'll say. I was reminded of something a friend told another friend that I heard. So it was like, one of those phone call conversations. But it's something I had heard many times, and this is true. So it was a good reminder because I have heard this. Pursue the Father, not the gifts, not the gift.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we pursue the gift and not the gift giver. And I think I've fallen into that. Where I want something from the Lord. I want this gift, And I think God does want us to have these gifts, but he's wise and knows when to receive them and if our heart's not in the right place. So I think that can be true as well. It could be a gift God does want to bestow upon you that you do want, but God just knows your heart that you're just pursuing that gift and not him.
For sure.
Yep.
What about, what would you have to say to how do you walk through, and I don't know if contentment is part of it, but how do you not let jealousy come in when it comes to gifts that you've seen others possess?
I think one of the things is recognizing what your gifts are. I think some of our lack is when we start being jealous or comparing is because it's like, I don't actually know what my gift is.
That's a good point.
And so when I see your gift, I'm like, ooh, maybe not yours, Steve. No. And when I say, joke.
Ouch.
When I see your gift, I'm like, oh, I really want that.
That guy's giftless. There's nothing to see there.
Scripture might be wrong.
I derailed us there. But when I see your gift and I see how good it is and I see what it is and I'm like, oh, I want that. But I don't actually see what my gift is in my life. And so, 1 Corinthians 12 talks about how we are each, we make up a body, right? We each have different parts and we can't all be the same thing. We can't all be the nose or the ear or the heart, so we each have a different thing. And if we don't recognize what our gifting is, then that's when we become jealous of other people's gifts because we don't know what God has given us and we don't know how God has intended to use us because we don't know what he's given us.
Yeah.
And so he has good gifts for us. And some people are at different levels than other gifts. And some of that is their pursuit.
Well, spiritual maturity comes into this.
Like if you want to know what your gift is, you got to pursue God for it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you got to battle for that. And truthfully, I have seen where I have been trained physically, or I was trained physically from a young age to compete. And that same training was then used in school, in my grades, and then used in my spiritual life. And it's that same training, that same determination that, yes, it could be used for evil, but it can be used for so much good.
Yeah.
And I think truly, actually, when it's used for evil, it's actually just taken to the extreme. What do they say? One of our greatest giftings are our biggest weaknesses taken to an extreme.
Absolutely.
And so that competition over here that we are like die hard on the field for, we can do the same thing when we are die hard in the field of, in the Word of God and competing for that and just be like, God, no, I'm going to pursue you. Yes, you're the one that draws me in, but I will pursue you until I am drawn in and I'm not going to give up. And that, again, it comes back to like, we have to understand what our gifting is to be able to walk fully in it. And sometimes we have to fight for that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
and I think
amen.
One of the things I was going to say earlier is when we want someone else's gifting, I think so often we don't even realize we don't want their gifting.
Right.
What we actually are desiring is we see that they've realized what their gifting is and are using it for the kingdom. That's what we want.
Yeah.
We don't care if we have a different gifting. We just want to use it for what we were made for.
Yeah.
And sometimes we misinterpret what our feelings are and we let it actually be like, oh, actually, I wish I had that gift. No, actually what it is you wish you were fulfilling what God has put you here for.
Yes.
Which is using whatever gift I've given you,
right,
but for my glory.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is what we all are looking for, whether we know it or not.
Right.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it is, and if you don't know what your spiritual gift is, it's hard to utilize it, you know? And so to actively pursue him.
Yeah, that's great stuff.
It is a very vital thing. Well, thank you guys.
For those of you who stuck with us.
Yeah, no, I think
So
people,
true.
Yes, I think people stuck through. They enjoy the little side conversations. Otherwise, they wouldn't be listening.
I
'cause
did.
That happens. Yeah, that happens.
This is fun.
That happens every week at varying levels. This also helped prepare me for tonight. Not to put too many timestamps or talk about stuff outside of this, but I have another conversation coming up that will be very much on track. But then right after that, I have my last pre-marriage counseling session with Colin and Rachel, and that will be derailed from the start.
Yes.
Because it is Colin who is inputting into that conversation.
Yeah.
Oh man, I love
pray
that
for
kid. Yeah. So it's so that this prepared me for that.
Practicing.
Yes, I was to say, but that'll be good. No. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We do want to encourage you to continue, and I know this was about competition and comparison, but I really do want to reiterate what we ended with, which is pursuing God and making sure that what it is that He has gifted you with, that you continue to pursue, find out exactly which spiritual gift He has given you and how to utilize it to grow His kingdom. And the fulfillment that'll come from that. And to be aware and continually ask the Holy Spirit to keep your competitive spirit in check, but also to utilize that to drive you to be more sanctified and to drive you to dive into the Word more and more. Thank you for joining us for the Federated Squared Circle, Wrestling with God's Word. We'll see you next week.